What's going on, everybody? We're back with an update to the Poison Slide build that everybody has been loving. I'm getting a lot of questions about any changes I've made. I have made a few tweaks to my skill tree. I have tried out every single different type of weapon combination, the Crone Staff, a two-handed, and a one-hand and a totem. So I will cover all of the advantages and disadvantages to those, show you guys my updated Paragon board, and just kind of cover any questions that people might be having, all of the frequent questions that people come in and chat and go ahead and ask me. I'm going to try to do more of a close to end game overview for you guys. That way you have a good idea going into that late game content. First, we're going to go ahead and do an overview of the skill tree. If you guys are running Cronin Staff, it will be a little bit different. You will want points into Claw going into Wild Claw. And then you can also put some points into Iron Fur, just because you'll be using Trample so much. The damage reduction is nice. That is up to you, personal preference, whether you want them in there and where you take your points from to be able to afford those slots. No matter what, though, you are going to want Storm Strike and then go into Fierce Storm Strike to make sure that everybody is vulnerable, even when your exploit glyph isn't going off. You're going to want max points in your Landslide. Then you're going to go into Primal Landslide. Then we want Heart of the Wild, but that is just so we can get to Wild Impulses, so that our core skills are doing increased damage. From there, you definitely want to put points into Predatory Instinct, just to give you a higher chance for those critical strikes. After that, one of our main focuses for damage is Earthen Bulwark. I go ahead and go into Preserving Bulwark, just to help you keep up that Fortify every time that you pop it. I know some people do like Innate Earthen Bulwark, which I haven't tried too much yet. Definitely a couple build ideas around that. So far, though, at level 86 and up to a Nightmare 75, I haven't needed to go that route. Maybe down the road that will change. But for now, we are sticking with Preserving Earthen Bulwark. Then you want to put 1 point into Ancestral Fortitude, just so that we can get the Vigilance. You gain 15% damage reduction for 6 seconds after using a defensive skill, just making you a little bit tankier every time you go ahead and use your Bulwark. Then we come down here, one key change that I did make is I went ahead and took the extra points out of Poison Creeper. I feel like late game, it seems like the poison damage kind of falls off, and the main point for Poison Creeper is just to proc that poison so that you're doing extra damage to poisoned enemies, not so much the poison doing damage itself. Just as far as the multiplicative damage and the damage multipliers go, it's really not worth it in my opinion. Then we obviously do want to go to Ferocious Poison Creeper, just because you want to have that poison last as long as possible. Again, it's all about the damage multipliers off enemies that are poisoned. So that is the main focus right there. We go ahead and then we come down. You're going to want 3 points into Crushing Earth. You're going to want 3 points into Safeguard. And then you're going to want 3 points into Stone Guard. You're going to hit Neurotoxin, but that's only for the Enum Venom. Enum Venom is a massive part of the damage for this build. It shows the plus next to it, but it is a part of the multiplicative damage. So it's also key to have the extra 3 points going into your amulet. That's honestly one of the most important things in the amulet, and in my opinion, or in my experience, it was also one of the hardest things to find. It honestly took me until like level 77 to find an amulet that had it. But once I did, I could definitely notice the damage difference. So this is a key ability right here, or passive. Then for Trample, you want Trample, obviously, for all of the landslides, the extra damage, the extra landslides going off, big part of the build. And then I go down into casting Savage Trample. Casting Trample grants 40 Spirit, just helping you maintain that Spirit. That way you are able to cast your extra landslides more often if you need to clean anything up. Landslides at this point are more just for cleanup than anything, because you are doing so much damage with everything else. You don't need to spam them quite as often, but always good to make sure that you have that Spirit there. Then for the ultimate skills, I go ahead and use Petrify. I know a lot of people like to use Cataclysm. Personally, I'm not as much of a fan. It knocks people away from you. It's just not quite as worthwhile. Petrify, then you're going to go ahead and have the extra critical strike damage. You're going to be getting your spirit back for every person that you kill. It's much better for the CC, and then we're going to use the heart that pulls everybody in. You pull everybody in with Petrified, they're CC'd, you're doing all of that extra damage. Whereas Cataclysm, it might pull them in, don't kill them fast enough, Lightning Bolt comes down, bounces them away, makes it a little bit harder for that targeted damage. In my opinion, I did try both of these out because I know after the last video, I had a bunch of people asking about it, and I used Cataclysm for a solid 5 levels. Just wasn't a fan, so we went back to Petrify. These, we go 3 points into Defiance, we go 3 points into Natural Disaster, and then another 3 into Resonance. Then for the final 2 points, I put them down here into Defensive Posture, just so that you are getting more Fortify. If you don't want to put them in there, I would recommend Circle of Life. That really just depends. Like if you're spamming your landslides, it can give you a little bit of extra life. It's not a ton of life, so I don't view it as being quite as worthwhile as the extra Fortify. That is, again, personal preference and up to you. And then for our key passive, we obviously go Nature's Fury. Nature's Fury is huge with this build because it plays off of the symbiotic aspect that we use that we'll talk about here in a second. Next up, we have our Spirit Boons. Nothing has really changed here, so if you've already seen these, you're welcome to skip to the next part. If you haven't, we use Wariness, take 10% reduced damage from elites, just really good for the extra damage reduction against elites and bosses. Then we go here, Avian Wrath, just so that we can gain the 30% critical strike damage. Obviously, that's a huge amount of damage, and you definitely don't want to miss out on that. Then we do for the Wolf, this is the one that we go ahead and bond with. We take the 20% for Pack Leader. Critical strikes have up to a 20% chance to reset cooldowns of your companion skills. This is obviously huge for constantly resetting your Poison Creeper as much as possible. And then we also want to go to extend the duration of ultimate skills by 25%. This is huge just because it keeps everybody CC'd for longer when we use Petrify. That way you have more of the damage procs and it's just easier to get that big damage out there. And then for the Snake, we go Calm Before the Storm. Nature magic skills have up to a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 2 seconds. None of these really benefit us too much. So obviously having that chance to be able to reduce your ultimate skill is always super beneficial. And that's why we go with Calm Before the Storm. Next up, we have Armor and our aspects. We don't quite have perfect rolls on everything. RNGesus just hasn't been our friend. We're level 86, and we're still trying to min-max and get all of the perfect gear, but we do have the best rolls that we've had in a long time. On our helm, we have Life on Kill, Maximum Life, Cooldown Reduction, and Total Armor, which is a god roll for us. And then we are also using basic skills grant 20% damage reduction for 2 to 6 seconds. This just obviously gives you more damage reduction, makes you a little bit tankier. Then we went ahead and we did make a change. We are using the duration of Earthen Bulwark is increased by 6 seconds on our chest. I have noticed getting into the higher tier content, we do become a little bit squishier. And that has been a big holdback for people, and one of the main things I've seen in comments. So I did make this change just so that we have Bulwark up more often, and I really have liked this so far. Now, we don't quite have the perfect chest piece yet, but it's the best one that we found. We have Total Armor, Damage Reduction, and then Damage Reduction from close enemies. Our only issue here is the damage while shapeshifted. Obviously, that's kind of a wasted stat for us. It would be nice to get that third damage reduction. On our gauntlets, the most important thing here is going to be ranks to landslide, which we were able to get that. And these are a god roll for the gauntlets and everything that you're going to want. Then critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, and critical strike damage with earth skills. I went ahead and put Nature's Fury onto my gauntlets when the Nature's Fury, the symbiotic aspect. When the Nature's Fury key passive triggers a free skill, your non-ultimate cooldowns of the opposite type are reduced, and we have a max roll of 5 seconds. This is huge for making sure that your Bulwark and your Trample come up more often. I do know that some people prefer to put this onto their amulet. They put it on their amulet. That way they are able to get 8 seconds instead of 5 seconds on the cooldown. I haven't played around with that too much. It's still working on our gauntlets. Maybe down the line, we'll need to move these around. But for now, we are sticking with them on our gauntlet. Then again, our pants are a little rough. Still not the god roll for us, but they do the job. We have damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned, damage reduction while fortified. Both are pretty much always proccing for us. We have max life on there, and then plus 27 all stats. You do want, again, the total armor and then 3 damage reduction on there. We just haven't quite been able to find them yet, so this is what we're going with. And then for our aspect, you gain 0.5% increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to 30%. This did get nerfed going into the season, but I definitely still feel like it is super important and very viable into the build to give us that extra survivability. On our boots, we have damage reduction while injured, spirit cost reduction, and then movement speed for 4 seconds after killing an elite. Those are 3 that you want. We have dexterity on here because, unfortunately, I spent millions on this thing trying to go ahead and re-roll it, and I just wasn't able to get it done. You do want that extra movement speed on there, and that will give you your god roll on your boots. Then for the amulet, you want total armor, ranks of venom, earth skill damage, and cooldown reduction. This is a god roll for us. These are the 4 stats that you're definitely going to want. Personally, I do have my trample aspect onto here. Trample now summons 6 landslide pillars of earth during this duration that deal 117% normal damage. I do feel like this is the best spot for it. I feel like putting it on the two-handed was a little bit of a waste. I prefer having the damage while fortified on the two-handed. This onto the amulet. Again, up to level 86, tier 75 Nightmare Dungeon. This has worked out for me. I do see the benefits of putting Symbiotic on there. So later on, as we get to the tier 100, things might change, and I will put out a final video, hopefully here in the next couple days, once we hit 100 and are able to complete a tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon. But for now, up to level 86, this is what we're going with. Then our rings are looking a little rough as well. On this one, we have critical strike chance, critical strike damage with earth skills, normal critical strike damage, and physical damage. You would want to swap out the physical for vulnerable. And then critical strike chance is, it's not a horrible one to have, but I would rather have core skill. Either one of those or maybe willpower would suffice. And then you're going to want all of those rolls on both of your rings because they are just extra damage, just like your two-handed is going to be. And then we did get a god roll on this staff. I do prefer axes, but on this staff, and this is what you are going to want on all of your weapons, is vulnerable damage, core skill damage, critical strike damage with earth skills, and then overall critical strike damage. If you are running a two-hand, then I do prefer your core skills deal up to 80% increased damage based on the amount of fortify. I haven't found a god roll for that yet. I am missing out on 24% damage right there. Hopefully that aspect will drop for me soon, but that is what you're going to want on your armor as far as stats go. And as far as aspects, I know that I didn't name all the aspects, but if you do go back, as I go over each one, I will have it up with the name of the aspect. And then also, if you go in my bio, there will be a link to this entire build, and it will detail out every single aspect for you, so it can be a little bit easier to follow along. All right, and now for the biggest question I'm getting. What weapon do you use? For me, I honestly have landed on the one-handed axe and then the totem. I prefer this combination because you are getting your critical strike damage, your vulnerable damage, your willpower, and then you're able to use the core skills deal up to 40% increased damage based on fortify. But then also with the totem, you're able to get some damage reduction. You're able to get lucky hit chance, cooldown reduction, and critical strike chance. So it's just giving you a little bit more utility. When I go ahead and use the totem, it boosts my lucky hit chance up to 24%. My CDR is at 27%. So it's a happy medium of the right damage, extra aspects, and CDR that you're going to be getting from the Cronin staff. The Cronin staff is really nice because you're auto attacking so much and proccing Nature's Fury so much. You're getting your trample and your bulwark a ton. With this CDR right here, and then just one proc on the symbiotic aspect, you're getting the same as you would with the Cronin staff, but with far more advantage. Then it also helps boost my critical strike chance all the way up to 39%, almost 40%. And honestly, with the critical strike chance and then also the lucky hit chance, I feel like my Poison Creeper is proccing far more often than it would have before, which is now almost a trifecta of CDR reduction. You're getting the benefits of the Cronin Staff, and the Cronin Staff is nice, but you are losing out on those two aspects. And you're also only getting damage to close enemies, damage to crowd-controlled enemies, and non-physical damage, which those are okay stats, but in the scheme of things, for our damage multipliers, they really aren't quite as worthwhile. Also, damage to crowd-controlled enemies is great as the main stat when you're clearing dungeons, and maybe when it comes to killing mobs, it might be a little bit faster, but it is far slower when you're going to go ahead and go against bosses. So for that reason, I enjoy going with these two. Obviously, the two-handeds are nice as well. You're going to have a ton of that extra core skill damage based on your Fortify. The two-handed axe is really good because you're doing so much more damage with your 84% damage to healthy enemies as far as your bosses go, especially if you're using the Barber. Side note, with the Barber, there have been some questions if it matters as far as how long and why. For the seconds, you want it 3 seconds or less on the Barber. That way you're also getting the proc from the vulnerable damage with your exploit or your storm strike. If it is any longer than 3 seconds, then you're not going to get that vulnerable damage anymore, and you are going to miss out on a massive damage multiplier right there. However, with weapons, it really is, pick your own poison depending on what you want to go. Again, you have the Cronin Staff with a bunch of attack speed, great for clearing mobs. You're going to have your Bulwark and your Trample up a lot more, but you are going to be lacking in other damage multiplier stats. You kind of have the happy medium with the one-handed and the offhand. You can go ahead and go with the two-handed, where your attack speed is going to be a little bit slower. You might struggle on Spirit a little bit more because of that attack speed slowness, but you are going to get way higher damage procs when you're doing AoE damage or single target damage to a boss. That is why I do think that the one-handed and the offhand is the happy medium between the Cronin Staff and then the two-handed. You're getting a lot of the benefits of the Cronin Staff as well as the two-handeds, but you're going to be moving a little bit faster. You're going to have some faster attack speed, helping you keep that Spirit up if you need it. So for me, it is the perfect balance. However, that is personal preference, and I would love to hear in the comments as to which one you guys think is best. Alright, and now lastly, the Paragon board. I'm going to give you guys a quick overview of this as well. I won't go quite as in depth with it as I did in my previous video. That video is completely dedicated to the Paragon board and stat prioritization, but I do want to give you guys an overview. And again, there will be a guide in my bio that will take you here, and you can go ahead and follow the entire thing. Much easier to follow the written guide if you just want to copy me and fill it out. But for the first build, we go ahead and use exploit for our glyph. Exploit is hands down one of the most important things for this build. When an enemy is damaged by you, they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. This cannot happen more than once every 20 seconds per enemy. And that's why Storm Strike is still important for us. So once this goes ahead and runs out, if you Storm Strike them, there's a 50% chance to continue making them vulnerable. That way they are taking a ton of extra damage. Then for the second board, we go with Heightened Malice. We went ahead and go with Heightened Malice because of the legendary node. While there are 3 or more poisoned enemies nearby, you deal 45% increased damage. Just another nice damage multiplier for us. Obviously, always popping Poison Creeper. Everybody's always poisoned, so you're almost always doing an extra 45% damage. For the glyph on here, we went ahead and went with Spirit. For every 5 dexterity purchased within range, you deal increased critical strike damage, just making it so that you are just hitting those massive crits. You end up doing, once you have this fully leveled out, 90% extra critical strike damage, which is huge. And then the additional bonus, critical strikes increase the damage an enemy takes from you by 2% for 20 seconds up to 12 seconds. So then it's also just taking extra damage. A huge damage multiplier right there on that one. Then for the third board, we do come out and go to the left first. And we go with Earthen Devastation. Earth and Devastation, your Earth skills deal 30% increased damage to enemies afflicted by crowd control. Obviously, with the Poison Creeper, it will be procced off of that. Also, the Landslide's knocking people around, immobilizing people with some of the passives that we have. So this is a huge node for us. And then we go ahead and go with Undaunted on this glyph. For every 5 intelligence purchased within range, you deal increased damage while fortified, and then the additional bonus, you gain up to 10% damage reduction the more fortify you have. So this one is nice because we are doing extra damage, but also becoming a little bit beefier with the added damage reduction. Then for our 4th board, we actually come up here, and then we go Constricting Tendrils. Constricting Tendrils is nice. I haven't quite connected to the legendary node yet. I may veer off and use the points somewhere else. For now, I do still plan to. Felt like getting to the next glyph is more important because I almost have all 3 of my glyphs fully leveled out. Then once I do, if I don't have the next one in there, I'm just kind of wasting the XP you get at the end of a Nightmare dungeon. But in this one, we throw in Earth and Sky. Grants bonus to all magic nodes within range, and then nature magic skills deal 10% increased damage to crowd control or vulnerable damage. Again, just another one that is going to give us a nice buff to the damage we're doing to crowd controlled and vulnerable enemies. And then for our final board, we come out here to the left. Didn't have a ton of points to spare. Didn't really see another legendary node that was going to be super worthwhile. So I decided to make sure to be able to hit a glyph, and then we go with Territorial over here. And you are going to want to do this on the Thunderstruck board. It's the only board that I found that I could get to the glyph quickly, and then also make it down here for the extra critical strike damage to crowd controlled enemies as well. So we're able to hit the glyph and hit a couple bonuses, and then also damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. Most enemies are always vulnerable, so it is giving you some nice damage reduction, some extra damage, and then Territorial. For every 5 dexterity purchased within range, you deal increased damage to close targets. With us using Petrify and then always pulling people in, you're pretty much always going to have enemies close in this build. We're not really ranged. So then you're always going to be doing that extra damage, but also you gain 10% damage reduction against close enemies. So it's another one that is going to allow you to do some extra damage, but then also become a little bit beefier because, again, as you get into the higher tier dungeons, that is one place that you do run into a little bit of an issue of being kind of squishy. So this helps mitigate that. You might want to switch Territorial for Earth and Sky if you are still feeling kind of squishy once you get to that point in the Paragon board. We still haven't made our way over there or to either of these at level 86. So I'm not 100% certain which way I will go. I think they are both definitely necessary, but which one we go with first is still up in the air, as Nightmare 75 is the highest that we've gotten to so far. But I am going to be trying to push 80s, 90s, and then to 100 by the end of this coming week. And once I am able to do that, we will come out with the final build video or guide and show you guys exactly everything that we use to build that tier 100 Nightmare dungeon.